I watched through the convenience store window as my daughter Jessica climbed back into the driver's seat of the Honda Pilot, the car I'd bought and put in my name just 6 months earlier. What she didn't know was that by tomorrow morning, that car would be sitting on a used car lot with a sold sign on it, and she'd be calling me in tears, begging to know what happened to her family's only vehicle. But let me back up and tell you how a 70-year-old grandmother ended up teaching her own daughter the hardest lesson of her life. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to hit that like button, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. My name is Dorothy Sullivan. I'm 70 years old, and 6 months ago I thought I was helping my daughter's struggling family by buying them a reliable vehicle. What I got in return was months of being treated like an inconvenient burden, culminating in being abandoned at a gas station in the middle of nowhere like a piece of unwanted luggage. This story really begins 18 months ago when my daughter, Jessica's carefully constructed life started crumbling around her. She was 45 years old, divorced for 3 years, and struggling to raise 2 teenagers, Madison, 16, and Tyler, 14. While working as a registered nurse at Denver General Hospital. Her ex-husband, Marcus, had moved to California and become increasingly unreliable with child support payments, leaving Jessica to shoulder the entire financial and emotional burden of single parenthood. I'd been watching my daughter struggle from my comfortable home in Boulder, just 30 miles away but feeling like a world apart from her chaos. After my husband Frank passed away 4 years earlier, I'd settled into a peaceful retirement routine. 35 years of teaching high school English had earned me a decent pension, and Frank's life insurance policy, combined with our paid-off house and modest savings, meant I was financially secure enough to enjoy my golden years without stress. My days were filled with volunteer work at the local library, tending to my garden, and weekly lunch dates with my book club friends. I'd earned this tranquility after decades of working full-time while raising Jessica, and I treasured the simple pleasure of not having to worry about money or anyone else's problems. But as much as I valued my independence, I couldn't ignore the growing strain in Jessica's voice during our weekly phone calls. She'd tell me about pulling double shifts at the hospital to make ends meet, about Madison needing money for school activities she couldn't afford, about Tyler acting out because he felt the stress at home. The exhaustion in her voice was palpable, and despite our sometimes complicated relationship, she was still my daughter. Jessica had always been a proud, independent woman, perhaps too proud for her own good. Even as a child, she'd insisted on doing things herself, whether it was tying her shoes or completing school projects. That independence had served her well in many ways, helping her graduate nursing school and build a successful career. But it also meant she rarely asked for help, even when she desperately needed it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in October. I was in my kitchen, preparing a quiet dinner for one and listening to NPR, when my phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the caller ID, which surprised me because she usually called on Sunday afternoons during our scheduled check-ins. "Mom?" Her voice was shaky, and I could hear traffic noise in the background. "Jessica? What's wrong? Where are you?" "I'm on the side of I-25 and my car just died. Completely died." There was this horrible grinding noise, and then smoke started pouring out from under the hood, and now it won't start at all. My heart sank. Jessica's 2009 Toyota Camry had been giving her problems for months. She'd mentioned strange noises and warning lights, but every time I suggested she take it to a mechanic, she'd brush off my concerns, saying she couldn't afford unnecessary repairs. "Are you safe? Is traffic moving around you okay?" "Yeah, I'm pulled over on the shoulder, and I called DAWALA. But Mom, I think this is it. I think the car is finally done for good." I could hear her trying not to cry, and it broke my heart. Jessica had bought that Camry used 7 years earlier, and it had been a reliable workhorse through her divorce and the challenging years of single parenthood. Losing it wasn't just an inconvenience. It was potentially catastrophic for a single mother who lived 20 miles from her workplace and had 2 teenagers with busy schedules. "What did the 8AA driver say when he looked at it?" I asked. He said, "It looks like the engine seized. He thinks the whole motor is destroyed. Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't afford another car payment right now. And without a car, I can't get to work. And the kids have school, and Madison has soccer practice, and Tyler has chess club, and—" Her voice broke, and I could hear her sobbing quietly. In that moment, all the careful boundaries I'd maintained around my retirement funds and my own financial security seemed less important than my daughter's crisis. "Jessica, breathe. We're going to figure this out." "How?" "I've been looking at my budget for months, trying to see if I could squeeze in a car payment, and there's just no room. Between the mortgage and Madison's braces and Tyler's tutoring and everything else, I'm already stretched beyond my limit." I thought about my own financial situation. Frank and I had been careful savers throughout our marriage, and his life insurance had been more generous than we'd expected. Combined with my pension and Social Security, I had a comfortable monthly income and a healthy emergency fund. Was this the kind of emergency that fund was meant for? "What if I helped?" I heard myself saying. "Mom, no. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. What if I helped you get a reliable car?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the sound of traffic rushing past her stranded vehicle. "Mom, cars are expensive. I'm not talking about a couple $100s here. A decent used car that I could trust to get me to work every day would cost thousands." "I understand that, Jessica. Let me think about what makes sense." The tow truck arrived while we were talking, and after arranging to have the Camry taken to Jessica's mechanic for a definitive diagnosis, I told her to take an Uber home and that we'd talk more in the morning. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator, a notepad, and all my financial statements spread out in front of me. I'd been managing my own finances since Frank's death, and I knew exactly what I could and couldn't afford. My monthly income from pension and Social Security was $3,200. My fixed expenses, property taxes, utilities, insurance, groceries, and other necessities totaled about $1,800 per month, leaving me with $1,400 in discretionary income. I'd been using that money for travel, gifts for the grandchildren, charitable donations, and building up my savings account. I had $47,000 in my emergency fund, money that Frank and I had carefully accumulated over the years for exactly this kind of unexpected crisis. The question was, did my daughter's transportation emergency qualify as my emergency? The next morning, the mechanic confirmed what the 8AA driver had suspected. The Camry's engine was completely destroyed, likely due to a long-developing oil leak that had finally caused catastrophic damage. The repair estimate was $6,800, far more than the car was worth. When I called Jessica with the news, she was surprisingly calm. "I figured as much," she said. "I've been expecting this for months. I just kept hoping the car would last long enough for me to save up for its replacement." "Jessica, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. I want to help you get a reliable car." "Mom, I appreciate the thought, but let me finish. I want to buy you a car. A good, reliable car that you won't have to worry about for years." The silence on the other end stretched so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Mom, that's incredibly generous, but I can't accept that kind of help. Cars cost tens of thousands of dollars. I know exactly what they cost. And I also know that you need reliable transportation to support your family. Let me do this for you." "What about your retirement? Your savings? I can't let you spend your nest egg on solving my problems." I'd been prepared for this objection. "Jessica, what good is having savings if I can't help my family when they really need it? Your father worked hard so that we'd be secure in retirement, but he also would have wanted me to take care of you and the grandchildren when you were struggling." It took 3 more phone calls over 2 days, but eventually Jessica agreed to let me help. She insisted on setting up a repayment plan, even though I told her it wasn't necessary. Mom, if you're going to spend this kind of money on me, then I need to know I'm going to pay you back. I won't feel right about it otherwise. Fine. I agreed, though I secretly had no intention of holding her to any formal repayment schedule. We'll work out something that fits your budget. The following Saturday, Jessica and I spent the entire day visiting dealerships in the Denver area. I'd done my homework, researching reliable used vehicles that would meet her family's needs without being too expensive. We were looking for something in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. Not new, but reliable and safe, with enough room for 2 teenagers and all their activities. At the third dealership we visited, we found it. A 2018 Honda Pilot with 52,000 miles on it. The SUV was perfect for Jessica's needs. Excellent safety ratings, plenty of cargo space for Madison's soccer equipment and Tyler's chess tournaments, and a reputation for reliability that meant she wouldn't have to worry about unexpected breakdowns. The asking price was $28,500, which the salesman assured us was competitive for the vehicle's condition and mileage. Jessica fell in love with it immediately, but I could see the guilt and anxiety written all over her face as she realized how much money this represented. Mom, this is too much. Maybe we should look at something less expensive. Jessica, we're not buying the most expensive car on the lot. We're buying the right car for your situation. This is an investment in your family's stability and safety. But when we sat down with the finance manager, reality hit. Despite having a steady job and decent income, Jessica's credit score had taken a beating during her divorce. Between the stress of splitting assets with Marcus and some missed payments during the most chaotic period of the separation, her credit rating qualified her only for high-interest financing that would have made the monthly payments unaffordable. What if I put the car in my name? I suggested. My credit is excellent, and I can qualify for much better terms. Jessica looked uncomfortable. Mom, I don't want you to be legally responsible for my car loan. It's not about legal responsibility. It's about getting you the best deal possible. We can transfer the title to your name once your credit improves. After much discussion and reassurance, Jessica agreed to the arrangement. I wrote a check for the down payment, $3,000, and put the loan in my name with a monthly payment of $420. I also arranged to add the vehicle to my insurance policy, which would actually save Jessica money compared to her current coverage. When we drove off the lot that afternoon with Jessica behind the wheel of her new Honda Pilot, I felt a deep satisfaction that I hadn't experienced since Frank's death. After 4 years of living primarily for myself, it felt wonderful to do something meaningful for my daughter and grandchildren. Mom, I can't thank you enough for this, Jessica said as we sat in the parking lot of a nearby restaurant, celebrating our successful car shopping with lunch. You've literally saved our lives. Family takes care of family, I told her. That's what your father always said. I promise I'll start making payments to you as soon as possible. Maybe not the full $420 right away, but I can probably manage $200 or $250 a month to start. Don't worry about that right now. Just focus on getting back on your feet. For the first few months, the arrangement worked beautifully. Jessica was getting to work reliably, which eliminated the stress and expense of constantly worrying about whether her car would start each morning. Madison and Tyler were happier because they could count on transportation to their various activities. And I felt good about using my resources to make a real difference in my family's life. Jessica called me every Sunday afternoon, as had been our tradition for years, but now our conversations were warmer and more grateful. She'd tell me about her week, update me on the kids' activities, and always mention how much she appreciated having reliable transportation. Mom, you have no idea what a relief it is to not worry about my car, she said during one of our calls. I can actually focus on my patients at work instead of wondering if I'll be able to drive home at the end of my shift. The kids seemed more relaxed, too. Madison's soccer performance improved now that she wasn't stressed about whether she'd be able to get to practices and games. Tyler started participating in additional chess tournaments because transportation was no longer a limiting factor. For about 3 months, I felt like I'd made one of the best decisions of my retirement years. But somewhere around the 4-month mark, I started noticing subtle changes in Jessica's behavior and attitude that made me uncomfortable. The first thing I noticed was that our weekly phone calls became shorter and less personal. Instead of the warm, chatty conversations we'd been having, Jessica started treating our calls more like obligation check-ins. She'd give me quick updates about work and the kids, thank me briefly for the car, and then find reasons to end the conversation quickly. "I should go, Mom. Madison needs help with her chemistry homework," or "Tyler's asking me to drive him to his friend's house," or "I have laundry to finish before tomorrow." When I suggested getting together for dinner or family activities, Jessica often said they were too busy or had other plans. This was particularly hurtful because we'd always made an effort to see each other regularly, and I'd been looking forward to spending more time with the grandchildren now that transportation wasn't a constant source of stress. But the most troubling change was in how Jessica talked about the car. What had started as Mom's car that I'm borrowing gradually became my car in her conversations. She began making decisions about the vehicle without consulting me, despite the fact that my name was on the title and I was making every payment. The first incident happened when she decided to have the oil changed at a different service center than the dealership had recommended, choosing a quick lube place that offered a cheaper price but potentially lower quality service. "Jessica, Honda recommends specific oil types and service intervals," I mentioned when she told me about it. "Don't you think we should follow their guidelines to protect the warranty?" "Mom, it's just an oil change. These quick lube places are fine, and it saves money." "But I'm paying for the maintenance. Saving money isn't the priority. Taking proper care of the car is." "You worry too much. Cars are pretty resilient." It was a small disagreement, but it bothered me because it suggested that Jessica wasn't thinking about the long-term value of the vehicle I'd purchased. More concerning was her assumption that she could make these decisions unilaterally, without discussing them with me. A few weeks later, she mentioned that she'd had aftermarket seat covers installed to protect the original upholstery from Madison's muddy soccer cleats. "That's probably a good idea," I agreed. "How much did that cost?" "Only about $150. I figured it was worth it to keep the seats looking nice." "You should have asked me first, Jessica. It's important that we discuss any modifications or additions before making them." "Mom, they're just seat covers. They're not permanent, and they'll actually help maintain the car's value." "That's not the point. The point is that this is still my car, legally and financially. Major decisions should be made together." Jessica's tone became defensive. "I wouldn't call seat covers a major decision, but fine. I'll check with you next time." But she didn't check with me the next time. A month later, I discovered that she'd had a small dent in the rear bumper repaired at a body shop, again without mentioning it to me until after the fact. "Jessica, this is exactly what I was talking about. You can't just make decisions about repairs and modifications without discussing them with me first." "Mom, it was just a tiny dent. Some kid hit it with a shopping cart in the grocery store parking lot. I thought you'd want me to get it fixed." "I would want you to get it fixed, but I'd also want to be involved in choosing the repair shop and approving the work. What if they'd done a poor job? What if there had been additional damage that needed to be addressed?" "You're overthinking. The repair came out fine." "That's not the point." But I could tell that Jessica didn't understand what the point was. In her mind, she was taking good care of her car and making reasonable decisions about its maintenance and appearance. She couldn't see that from my perspective. She was making unilateral choices about an expensive asset that belonged to me and that I was paying for. The situation came to a head when I gently brought up the subject of her taking over the car payments. As we'd originally discussed, it was during one of our Sunday phone calls, about 5 months after we'd bought the car. Jessica was telling me about Madison's upcoming soccer tournament and how grateful she was to have reliable transportation for all the travel involved. Speaking of the car, I said, I've been thinking it might be time to talk about transitioning. The payments to you. Your credit should have improved by now, and it would probably make sense to get the loan in your name. There was a pause that felt longer than it should have. Mom, you know my financial situation hasn't really changed. Between Madison's braces and Tyler's tutoring and all the regular expenses, I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. I understand that money is tight, but Jessica, the car payment is $420 a month, plus insurance. That's a significant expense for me to carry indefinitely. Well, you offered to help. I didn't force you to buy the car. The dismissive tone in her voice caught me completely off guard. It was as if she'd forgotten that this had been an emergency situation, that I'd stepped in to help when she was desperate and had no other options. Jessica, I offered to help because you were in crisis, but the plan was always for this to be temporary until you could take over the payments yourself. Mom, I never agreed to any specific timeline, and honestly, you can afford this a lot better than I can. You're retired, you don't have kids to support, and you have savings. This is much easier for you than it would be for me. I felt like I'd been slapped. The idea that supporting her family financially was easy for me, or that I should be expected to do it indefinitely because I'd been responsible with my money, was so fundamentally unfair that I didn't know how to respond. Jessica, that's not how this works. I helped you in an emergency, but I'm not your personal bank account. I'm not treating you like a bank account, but you offered to help, and now you're acting like I'm taking advantage of you. Aren't you? Another long pause. Mom, I think you're being unfair. I never asked you to buy me a car. You insisted on helping, and now you're making me feel guilty about accepting that help. That night, I lay in bed replaying our conversation and trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. I genuinely wanted to help my daughter through a difficult situation, but somehow my generosity had been reframed as an obligation. Jessica seemed to believe that because I could afford to help, I should be willing to help indefinitely, without any expectation of gratitude or reciprocity. But what bothered me most was the realization that Jessica had never intended to take over the car payments. When we'd discussed repayment during the initial purchase, she'd been agreeing to something she had no intention of following through on. She'd let me believe we were creating a temporary arrangement when she'd actually been accepting a permanent gift. I started paying closer attention to Jessica's behavior and comments, and a troubling pattern emerged. She'd begun talking about the Honda Pilot as unquestionably hers, making plans for road trips and family vacations that assumed she'd have access to the vehicle indefinitely. When Madison asked about borrowing the car for a friend's Sweet 16 party, Jessica had said yes without even mentioning it to me. Most concerning was how Jessica talked about me to her friends and coworkers. I discovered this accidentally when I answered her phone during one of my visits because she was in the bathroom and it wouldn't stop ringing. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Sullivan," said the voice on the other end. "This is Karen from Jessica's work. I was just calling to see if she wanted to switch shifts next weekend. She's not available right now, but I'll have her call you back." "No problem. And hey, Jessica is so lucky to have a mom who's willing to help out with the car situation. My mother would never be able to do something like that for me." The comment stuck with me because of how it was phrased. Not "Jessica is grateful for her mother's help," or "what a generous thing for you to do," but "Jessica is lucky that I was willing to help," as if my assistance was something she'd won in a lottery rather than a sacrifice I was making for her benefit. When I mentioned the call to Jessica, she brushed it off. "Mom, I don't control what other people say about our family situation. But Jessica, how do you talk about our arrangement when you're at work?" "I don't really discuss our personal business with my coworkers. But obviously you've told them that I bought you a car." "Well, yes, it's not a secret. but I don't sit around talking about our family finances. I suspected there was more to the story, but I didn't want to press the issue and create more conflict between us. The breaking point was still 2 months away, but looking back, I can see that this conversation was when I first started to understand that Jessica and I had very different ideas about what our arrangement meant and how long it was supposed to last. I'd thought I was helping my daughter through a temporary crisis. She'd apparently thought I was solving her transportation problems permanently. And somewhere in that gap between our expectations, our relationship was starting to fracture in ways that would lead to one of the most shocking betrayals I'd ever experienced. But I was still trying to be understanding, still making excuses for her behavior, still believing that we could work through our differences like the loving family I thought we were. I had no idea how wrong I was. The months that followed my conversation with Jessica about taking over the car payments were like watching a slow-motion train wreck. What had started as subtle shifts in attitude became increasingly obvious patterns of disrespect and entitlement. I kept telling myself that Jessica was just stressed, that single parenthood was overwhelming, that she didn't really mean to be so dismissive of my sacrifices. But deep down, I was beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed in how my daughter viewed me and our relationship. The transformation became most apparent during the Christmas holidays. For the past 4 years since Frank's death, Jessica and the kids had always come to my house in Boulder for Christmas Eve dinner. It was a tradition I treasured, cooking Frank's favorite ham recipe, setting the table with my grandmother's china, watching Madison and Tyler open presents by the fireplace where their grandfather used to tell them stories. But in December, just 7 months after I'd bought the Honda Pilot, Jessica called to tell me there had been a change of plans. "Mom, we're going to do Christmas a little differently this year," she said during our Sunday phone call, her tone casual as if she was discussing the weather. "What do you mean differently?" "Well, Madison has been invited to spend Christmas Eve with her boyfriend's family. You know, Derek, the boy she's been dating from her soccer team. And Tyler wants to have some friends over for a gaming marathon. So I thought we'd just do a quiet Christmas at home this year." I sat in my living room, looking at the Christmas decorations I'd already put up, the stockings I'd hung with their names embroidered on them, the gifts I'd been carefully selecting and wrapping for weeks. What about our Christmas Eve dinner? What about our family tradition? "Mom, the kids are getting older. They have their own interests and social lives now. We can't expect them to want to do the same things forever." "But Jessica, this is Christmas. This is family time. We'll see you sometime during the holidays, I promise. Maybe we can do lunch on the weekend after Christmas or something like that." Something like that. Our cherished family tradition had been reduced to something like that. What if I came to your house instead? I could bring the ham, and we could— "Mom, honestly, this year is just really complicated with the kids' schedules. Let's just keep things low-key and plan something for after the holidays." I hung up feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. For 4 years, Christmas Eve dinner had been the highlight of my holiday season. It was the one tradition that made the house feel less empty without Frank. The one event that reminded me I was still an important part of my family's life. But apparently, I wasn't important enough for Jessica to maintain that tradition when it conflicted with her teenager's social plans. 2 days later, I saw photos on Facebook that made the situation even more painful. Jessica had posted pictures of Christmas Eve at their house, not the quiet family evening she'd described to me, but a full celebration with Derek's entire family. They'd had dinner, exchanged gifts, and taken family photos by their tree. Madison and Tyler looked happy and festive, surrounded by Derek's parents, grandparents, and siblings. I stared at those photos for a long time, trying to understand why. Derek's family had been worthy of Christmas Eve celebration, while I had been dismissed with vague promises of lunch sometime after the holidays. The answer, I realized, was that Derek's family hadn't spent $30,000 on a car for Jessica. They were guests to be impressed and accommodated, while I was family to be taken for granted. When I called Jessica to ask about the photos, she became defensive. "Mom, Derek's family invited us to join their celebration. It would have been rude to say no. But you told me you wanted to keep Christmas low-key this year." Well, things changed. Derek's mom really wanted Madison to be there. And you know how important this relationship is to Madison. What about how important our relationship is to me? "Mom, you're being dramatic. It's just one Christmas. We'll do our family dinner next year." But it wasn't just one Christmas. It was a signal that Jessica now felt comfortable prioritizing other people's expectations over mine, secure in the knowledge that I would always be available whenever it was convenient for her. The pattern continued into the new year. When I suggested taking the kids on a spring break trip to visit some national parks, something I could easily afford, and that I thought would be educational and fun, Jessica said they were too busy with school activities. But when Derek's family invited Madison to join them for a ski weekend in Aspen, suddenly a weekend away from school activities was perfectly acceptable. When I offered to take Tyler to a science museum in Denver that was featuring an exhibit about space exploration, something he'd mentioned being interested in, Jessica said he was too tired from his busy schedule. But when his friend's father invited him to a Rockies baseball game the same weekend, Tyler suddenly had plenty of energy for a day-long outing. The message was becoming clear. Jessica was perfectly willing to accept my financial support, but she no longer felt obligated to include me in their lives in meaningful ways. I was useful for providing the car that made their social activities possible, but I wasn't important enough to be prioritized when making plans for those activities. But the most painful realization was how Jessica's attitude was affecting Madison and Tyler's behavior toward me. Madison, who had always been a sweet and affectionate granddaughter, started treating me with the same casual dismissiveness that Jessica showed. When I'd call to chat with her, she'd give me brief, distracted answers before asking to talk to. Someone else or claiming she had homework to do? "Hi, Grandma Dorothy. Yeah, school's fine. Soccer's fine. I have to go study for a test now. Can you call back later?" When I'd offer to take her shopping for school clothes or help her with college preparation, both things we'd always enjoyed doing together, she'd decline with polite but distant excuses. "Thanks, Grandma, but Mom and I already went shopping." Or, "I'm handling the college stuff with my guidance counselor." Tyler's transformation was even more dramatic. He'd always been my little buddy, the grandson who loved to hear stories about his grandfather and who would spend hours helping me in my garden when they visited. But sometime during that spring, he started treating me like an inconvenience. When I'd suggest activities we could do together, he'd roll his eyes and say he was too old for the things I proposed. When I'd try to engage him in conversation about school or his interests, he'd give me one-word answers and then find excuses to leave the room. Most heartbreaking was the day I visited their house and found Tyler playing a video game in the living room. I sat down next to him and tried to show interest in what he was doing, asking questions about the game and complimenting his skills. "Tyler, this looks really complex. Could you teach me how to play?" He paused the game and looked at me with an expression of barely concealed irritation. "Grandma, no offense, but you wouldn't understand this game. It's pretty complicated. I might be older than you, but I'm not stupid. I think I could learn if you showed me." It's not about being stupid. It's just, this isn't really something for grandmas. The casual cruelty of that comment took my breath away. I'd been relegated to the category of grandmas, a generic, outdated demographic that was incompatible with anything interesting or relevant. When I mentioned Tyler's attitude to Jessica, she brushed off my concerns. "Mom, he's 14, teenage. Boys are rude to everyone. It's not personal. It feels personal when he acts like spending time with me is a chore. He's just going through a phase. He'll grow out of it." But I could see that Tyler's attitude toward me wasn't a phase. It was learned behavior. He was mimicking the dismissive way Jessica treated me, absorbing the message that Grandma Dorothy was someone to be tolerated rather than valued. The situation reached a new low during Tyler's 15th birthday in May. I'd asked Jessica what Tyler wanted for his birthday and had gone to considerable effort to find the perfect gift, a high-quality telescope that I thought would feed his interest in astronomy and give us something to explore together. When I arrived at their house for Tyler's birthday dinner, I was shocked to discover that it wasn't the family celebration I'd expected. Instead, Jessica had organized a party for 12 of Tyler's friends, complete with pizza, video games, and teenage chaos that made any meaningful family interaction impossible. "Jessica, I thought this was going to be a family dinner," I said, pulling her aside while the teenagers played loud music and shouted over each other in the living room. "This is family dinner. Tyler wanted to include his friends, and I thought it would be more fun for him this way. But there's no opportunity for family conversation or connection. I can barely hear myself think in here. Mom, this is what Tyler wanted. It's his birthday." I spent 2 hours at that party feeling completely out of place, watching my grandson interact with his friends while barely acknowledging my presence. When he opened my telescope gift, he said thanks without looking up from his phone, then immediately set it aside to continue unwrapping presents from his friends. Later, when I was getting ready to leave, I overheard a conversation between Tyler and one of his friends that made my blood run cold. "Who's the old lady?" the friend asked. "That's my grandma. She bought my mom's car, so we have to invite her to stuff sometimes." "That's cool that she bought you guys a car." "Yeah, I guess. She's okay, but she's kind of weird. She's always trying to get me to do old people stuff with her." I stood in the hallway, holding my purse and coat, feeling like I'd been physically struck. In Tyler's mind, I wasn't his grandmother who loved him and wanted to spend time with him. I was the old lady who had bought them a car and therefore had to be occasionally tolerated. And Jessica was standing right there, hearing the same conversation. But she didn't correct him or defend me. She just continued stacking paper plates and cleaning up, as if her son's casual disrespect for his grandmother was perfectly acceptable. That night, I drove home to Boulder in tears, trying to understand how my relationship with my family had deteriorated so completely. I'd thought that helping Jessica with the car would bring us closer together, would give me a more important role in their lives. Instead, it seemed to have reduced me to a transaction, someone who provided financial benefits in exchange for minimal social inclusion. But the worst was yet to come. In June, Jessica announced that the family was planning a summer vacation to California to visit Marcus, her ex-husband. This was the first I'd heard of any travel plans, despite the fact that I was paying for the vehicle that would make their road trip possible. "How long will you be gone?" I asked during one of our increasingly brief phone calls. "About 10 days. Marcus is taking the kids to Disneyland and the beach, and I thought it would be good for them to spend some extended time with their dad." "That sounds nice. Are you planning to drive?" "Yeah, it'll be a fun road trip. The kids are excited about seeing California." It wasn't until later in the conversation that I realized Jessica hadn't even considered including me in their vacation plans, despite the fact that I'd always been included in major family trips in the past. "Jessica, you didn't mention whether there might be room for me to join you. I'd love to see California again, and I could help with driving." There was a pause that felt loaded with significance. "Mom, this is really a trip for the kids to spend time with their dad. It would be kind of awkward to have you there." "Awkward how?" "Well, you and Marcus never really got along, and I think it would be better if we kept things simple." It was true that Marcus and I had never been close, but we'd always been cordial for Jessica's sake and the children's benefit. The idea that my presence would be awkward felt like a convenient excuse rather than a legitimate concern. What if I just came for part of the trip? I could fly out and meet you there or drive separately. "Mom, honestly, this is just something we want to do as our immediate family. I hope you understand." Our immediate family. The phrase hit me like a slap. Apparently, I was no longer considered part of Jessica's immediate family, despite being the person who'd made their family road trip financially possible. "Jessica, I'm the one paying for the car you'll be driving to California." What does that have to do with vacation plans? It just seems like if I'm supporting the vehicle that's making your trip possible, I might be included in discussions about how that vehicle is being used. Mom, you're making this weird. The car payment has nothing to do with our family vacation. But that was exactly the problem. In Jessica's mind, my financial contributions existed in a separate category from our family relationships. She felt entitled to my money without feeling obligated to include me in the experiences that money made possible. 2 weeks later, I watched through my living room window as Jessica loaded the Honda Pilot with suitcases, beach toys, and road trip snacks. Madison and Tyler were excited and energetic, looking forward to their California adventure. Jessica was smiling and relaxed, anticipating 10 days of vacation from her regular responsibilities. And I was standing in my house alone, watching them drive away in the car I'd bought, heading off on the vacation I'd made possible but wasn't invited to join. That's when I started seriously questioning whether my relationship with Jessica was based on love and mutual respect, or whether I'd accidentally created a dynamic where I was valued primarily for my financial contributions rather than my role as mother and grandmother. The answer became crystal clear 6 weeks later, during the incident that would change everything between us forever. It was a Saturday in late July, one of those perfect Colorado summer days when the mountains looked close enough to touch and the sky stretched endlessly blue above Boulder. I'd been looking forward to this particular Saturday for weeks because Jessica had finally agreed to a family outing that included me. The kids and I are going to drive up to Rocky Mountain National Park for a day of hiking, she'd told me during our previous phone call. Would you like to come with us? We could pack a picnic lunch and make a real day of it. I'd been thrilled. It had been months since we'd done anything together as a family, and I'd missed the easy camaraderie we used to share during outdoor adventures. Frank and I had taken Jessica hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park when she was Madison and Tyler's age, and I had wonderful memories of family bonding on mountain trails. That sounds perfect, I'd told her. I'll pack sandwiches and bring my good hiking boots. We'd agreed that they would pick me up at 8 a.m., giving us a full day in the park before the afternoon thunderstorms that were common in the mountains during summer. I was ready by 7:30, standing at my kitchen window with a backpack full of sandwiches, water bottles, trail mix, and first aid supplies. I'd even packed a thermos of coffee and some of Tyler's favorite cookies, hoping to recreate some of the warmth and connection that had been missing from our recent interactions. At 8:15, I called Jessica's cell phone. Hi, Mom. Yeah, we're running. A little late. The kids took forever to get ready, and I had to stop for gas. We should be there in about 20 minutes. No problem. I'm ready whenever you are. But 8:35 came and went without any sign of the Honda Pilot. At 8:45, I called again. Mom, sorry. We're still on our way. Tyler forgot his inhaler, and we had to go back home to get it. We'll be there soon. Another 20 minutes passed. Then, 30. At 9:30, I called a third time, starting to worry that something might be wrong. Jessica, it's been an hour and a half since you were supposed to pick me up. Is everything okay? Mom, we've had a bunch of delays this morning, and honestly, if we come all the way to Boulder to get you now, we'll lose half the day. Why don't we just plan to do this another time? I felt like she'd thrown cold water on me. Another time? Yeah, maybe next weekend or something. Today just isn't working out the way we planned. Jessica, I've been ready for 2 hours. I packed lunch for everyone. I cleared my entire day for this. I know, and I'm sorry about the timing. But Mom, you have to understand that with kids, these things happen. Plans change. Plans don't just change, Jessica. People make choices about priorities. There was a pause, and when Jessica spoke again, her tone had shifted from apologetic to defensive. What's that supposed to mean? It means that if including me in this outing was actually important to you, you would have managed your time better. Mom, that's not fair. We didn't cancel on purpose. Maybe not, but you didn't make much effort to follow through either. You know what? Maybe it's better that we postpone this. You sound upset, and I don't want that energy around the kids all day. I'm upset because I feel like you don't value my time or our plans together. Mom, I'm not doing this right now. We'll talk later. And she hung up. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing my hiking boots and holding my backpack, feeling completely deflated. This was supposed to have been our big family reconciliation outing, the day that got our relationship back on track. Instead, it had become another example of how little consideration Jessica gave to my feelings or my time. But what happened next was even worse. 2 hours later, my neighbor knocked on my door. Dorothy, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I saw your daughter and grandkids earlier this morning. They looked like they were heading out for a day trip. My stomach clenched. What time did you see them? Oh, it was early. Maybe 7:45 or 8 o'clock. They had a car full of hiking gear and coolers. I waved, but I don't think they saw me. They had driven past my house, on their way out of town, at the exact time they were supposed to be picking me up. All those excuses about being late, about Tyler's forgotten inhaler, about delays that made it impossible to include me, they had been lies. Jessica had never intended to pick me up. She had planned from the beginning to exclude me from the family outing, but she hadn't had the courage to tell me directly. Instead, she'd strung me along with increasingly elaborate excuses until she felt enough time had passed to cancel without, seeming deliberately hurtful. That afternoon, while I sat alone in my house trying to process what had happened, Jessica posted photos on Facebook from their day at Rocky Mountain National Park. Pictures of Madison and Tyler smiling on mountain trails, scenic views from hiking overlooks, and a family selfie with the caption, "Perfect day for family adventures." The photos were taken at Bear Lake, one of the most popular and accessible destinations in the park, a place that would have been perfect for a grandmother with aging knees and a desire to spend time with her family. They hadn't excluded me because the hike was too challenging or because their plans were too complicated to include an additional person. They had excluded me because they simply didn't want me there, and then they had lied to my face about it. That night, I called Jessica to confront her about what my neighbor had seen. Jessica, Mrs. Peterson saw you driving past my house this morning, around 8 o'clock, right when you were supposed to be picking me up. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mom, I can explain. Can you? Because it seems pretty clear to me. You never intended to include me today. You made up a story about being late so you could cancel without admitting that you didn't want me to come. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me. Another pause. Mom, the truth is that the kids said they wanted it to be just us today. They felt like having you there would change the dynamic. Change the dynamic how? They wanted to be able to talk freely and just be themselves without worrying about, No, I don't know. Worrying about what? About whether you'd approve of their conversations or their behavior. They felt like they'd have to be on their best behavior if Grandma was along. The words stung worse than if she'd slapped me. My grandchildren viewed me as such a judgmental presence that they couldn't relax and be themselves around me. And instead of correcting that perception or helping them understand that I loved them unconditionally, Jessica had chosen to exclude me to make them more comfortable. Jessica, when did I become the kind of grandmother that children need to hide from? You're not. It's just, you have expectations, Mom, standards. And sometimes that can feel pressure-filled for teenagers. What kind of expectations? What standards? Well, like when Tyler uses slang that you don't understand, you ask him to repeat himself in proper English. Or when Madison talks about boys, you make comments about appropriate behavior. The kids feel like they're being evaluated all the time. I thought about the conversations Jessica was describing, trying to remember when I'd been critical or judgmental. Yes, I sometimes asked for clarification when the kids used slang I didn't. recognize. But that was because I wanted to understand them better, not because I disapproved. And yes, I occasionally offered gentle guidance about relationships and behavior, but that was what grandparents did. Shared wisdom and perspective gained through experience. "I'm trying to be a good grandmother," I said quietly. "I'm trying to be involved in their lives and share what I've learned." "I know you are, Mom, but sometimes your idea of being a good grandmother feels like criticism to them. So instead of helping them understand that I love them and want what's best for them, you decided to exclude me entirely?" I decided to give them a day where they could just be kids without feeling like they were being watched and judged by their grandmother who bought them the car they were riding in. "Mom, why do you keep bringing up the car? This has nothing to do with the car." "Doesn't it, Jessica? Because it seems to me like you're perfectly happy to accept my financial support while excluding me from the experiences that support makes possible. That's not fair. Neither is lying to me about your plans and then posting pictures of your family adventure on social media for everyone to see." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had a hardness I'd never heard before. "Mom, maybe we need to have an honest conversation about boundaries. I appreciate everything you've done to help us, but I can't have you holding the car over our heads every time you don't like a decision I make as a parent. I'm not holding anything over your head. I'm asking to be treated with basic respect and consideration. And I'm asking you to respect my decisions about what's best for my children, even when those decisions involve lying to me and deliberately excluding me? Even then." The finality in her voice told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with better communication. This wasn't a temporary rough patch that would smooth out over time. This was Jessica establishing the terms of our relationship going forward. I could continue to provide financial support, but I would no longer be included in family decisions or activities unless it was convenient for her. I would be tolerated when my presence was useful and excluded when it wasn't, and I was expected to accept this arrangement without complaint. That conversation happened on a Sunday evening in July. By September, Jessica would abandon me at a gas station like a piece of unwanted luggage, but I was already beginning to plan my response. That conversation happened on a Sunday evening in July. By September, Jessica would abandon me at a gas station like a piece of unwanted luggage, but I was already beginning to plan my response. The weeks following our confrontation about the hiking trip were marked by an uncomfortable tension that neither Jessica nor I seemed willing to address directly. Our weekly phone calls became even more stilted and brief, filled with polite inquiries about work and weather that carefully avoided any mention of family activities or future plans. Jessica had made her position clear. She would accept my financial support while reserving the right to exclude me from family life whenever my presence felt inconvenient. And she expected me to accept this arrangement without complaint, as if being allowed to pay for their car was a privilege rather than a sacrifice. But what Jessica didn't understand was that our confrontation had been a turning point for me as, well, for the first time since I'd bought the Honda Pilot, I was beginning to see our relationship with clear eyes rather than through the lens of maternal love and hope. And what I saw was deeply troubling. I'd spent 8 months making significant financial sacrifices, $420 monthly car payments plus insurance that totaled nearly $600 per month, while watching my role in Jessica's family diminish rather than grow. Instead of bringing us closer together, my generosity had somehow given Jessica permission to treat me with less consideration rather than more. The pattern was so clear that I wondered how I'd missed it for so long. Every major family event, holiday celebration, and special occasion had become an opportunity for Jessica to demonstrate that I was no longer a priority in their lives. Christmas Eve with Derek's family instead of me. Spring break plans that didn't include me. Tyler's birthday party where I was barely acknowledged. The California vacation I wasn't invited to join. The hiking trip I was deliberately excluded from. Meanwhile, The Honda Pilot that I was paying for had become central to all of these activities. Jessica used my car to drive to Derek's family celebrations, to take Madison to soccer events I wasn't told about, to transport Tyler to activities I wasn't included in, and to take family trips I wasn't invited to join. I was funding their social life while being systematically excluded from it. But what disturbed me most was how my grandchildren's attitudes toward me had deteriorated. Madison and Tyler had learned to see me as someone who could be safely dismissed, whose feelings didn't matter, whose presence was more burden than blessing. And Jessica was not only allowing this disrespect, she was actively encouraging it by prioritizing their comfort over my inclusion. Tyler's comment at his birthday party kept replaying in my mind. "That's my grandma. She bought my mom's car, so we have to invite her to stuff sometimes." In my 15-year-old grandson's understanding, I wasn't his beloved grandmother who deserved love and respect. I was a financial obligation to be occasionally tolerated, and Jessica thought this was perfectly acceptable. The more I reflected on our situation, the more I realized that Jessica had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of family relationships. She seemed to believe that accepting my help created no corresponding obligations on her part, that I should be grateful for the opportunity to support her family while expecting nothing in return except the occasional grudging inclusion when it was convenient. This wasn't how family was supposed to work. Family meant mutual consideration, reciprocal respect, and genuine care for each other's feelings and needs. What Jessica was offering me was a transactional relationship where I provided financial benefits in exchange for minimal social access to people I loved. It was degrading, hurtful, and completely unsustainable. But I wasn't ready to confront Jessica again. Not yet. Our last conversation had made it clear that she viewed any expectations on my part as unreasonable demands. She'd established her boundaries. She would take my money, but not my input, accept my support, but not my presence. And she expected me to live within those limitations without complaint. So instead of arguing with her, I started making plans. The first thing I did was contact my attorney, Richard Walsh, who had handled Frank's estate and my financial planning for the past several years. Richard was a thoughtful man in his early 60s who had always given me excellent advice about protecting my assets and planning for the future. "Richard, I need to understand something about vehicle ownership and loans," I said during our phone conversation in early August. "If I own a car and someone else is driving it, what are my legal rights regarding that vehicle?" "Well, Dorothy, that depends on the specific circumstances. Are we talking about a situation where you've loaned a car to someone, or where you've given someone permission to use a vehicle you own? I bought a car for my daughter's family. The title is in my name, the loan is in my name, and I'm making all the payments. But they're treating it as if it belongs to them. Have you signed any kind of formal agreement giving them ownership, rights, or use rights?" "No, nothing formal. It was just a family arrangement to help them through a difficult time." "Then legally, you retain full ownership rights to that vehicle. You can reclaim it, sell it, or transfer it at any time. The fact that someone else has been driving it doesn't change your ownership status." "What if they refuse to return it?" "If you own the vehicle and they refuse to return it when you request it, that could constitute theft. But I'd recommend trying to resolve the situation amicably before involving law enforcement. And if I decided to sell the vehicle, would I need their permission?" "Not at all. As the legal owner, you have the right to sell your property whenever and to whomever you choose. You'd want to give them reasonable notice if they've been relying on the vehicle for transportation, but legally, you don't need their consent." The conversation was enlightening. I'd been thinking about the Honda Pilot as Jessica's car for so long that I'd almost forgotten that it was actually my car, purchased with my money, financed through my credit, titled in my name, and insured under my policy. Jessica had been treating me like an unwelcome intruder in decisions about her car, when in reality, she was driving my car as a guest privilege that could be revoked at any time. This legal clarity was empowering, but I wasn't planning to act on it immediately. I wanted to give Jessica one more chance to remember that family relationships should be based on mutual respect rather than one-sided exploitation. That chance came during the final straw, an incident so shocking and hurtful that it crystallized everything I needed to know about how my daughter really viewed me. It was a Saturday in late September, one of those perfect Colorado autumn days when the aspen trees were just beginning to turn gold and the air held that crisp promise of winter. I'd been looking forward to this particular Saturday for weeks because Jessica had finally agreed to a family outing that included me. The kids and I are going to drive up to Golden to visit the Coors Brewery and then maybe do some shopping, she'd told me during our previous phone call. Would you like to come with us? We could make a day of it. I'd been thrilled. It had been months since we'd done anything together as a family, and I'd missed the easy camaraderie we used to share during weekend adventures. Jessica and I had taken similar day trips when she was Madison and Tyler's age, and I had wonderful memories of mother-daughter bonding on spontaneous Saturday outings. That sounds perfect, I'd told her. I'd love to spend the day with you all. We'd agreed that they would pick me up at 10 a.m., giving us a full day to explore Golden and maybe grab dinner together before heading home. I was ready by 9:45, standing at my kitchen window with a small purse and a light jacket, looking forward to reconnecting with my family. I'd even brought some homemade cookies in case the kids got hungry during our outing. At 10:15, the Honda Pilot pulled into my driveway. Madison was in the front passenger seat. Tyler was in the back, and Jessica was driving. Everyone seemed relaxed and cheerful as I climbed into the back seat next to Tyler. "Hi, Grandma Dorothy," Madison said, turning around to smile at me. "Thanks for coming with us today." "Thanks for including me, sweetheart. I've missed spending time with you." Tyler even put away his phone long enough to ask about my week and tell me about his recent chess tournament performance. For the first time in months, I felt like I was part of a normal family outing, rather than an unwelcome obligation. We drove toward Golden, chatting about school, work, and weekend plans. The conversation was easy and natural, reminding me of the close family relationships I'd been missing for so long. Maybe Jessica had finally realized that excluding me from family life was hurting our relationship and was ready to make a genuine effort to include me more consistently. About halfway to Golden, Jessica pulled into a gas station. "I need to fill up," she announced, pulling up to one of the pumps. "And I think we could all use a bathroom break before we get to the brewery." "Good idea," I agreed. "I could definitely use the restroom." Jessica turned off the engine and everyone got out of the car. "Tyler, you come help me with the gas," she said. "Madison, you can pick out some snacks for the road. Mom, there's a restroom inside if you need it." I was grateful for the chance to use the facilities. The gas station was busy with Saturday afternoon travelers, and there was a short line for the women's restroom, so I had to wait a few minutes before it became available. When I finished in La Rosa, the restroom, I took a moment to browse the convenience store, looking at the snack options and stretching my legs after sitting in the car. I picked out a bottle of water and some trail mix, thinking it would be nice to contribute something to our family snack collection. I paid for my items and walked outside, expecting to find Jessica finishing up with the gas pump and the kids, climbing back into the Honda Pilot for the continuation of our journey to Golden, but the car was gone. I stood in the parking lot, holding my bottle of water and trail mix, looking around in confusion. Maybe Jessica had moved the car to a different spot to make room for other customers. Maybe they'd driven around to the other side of the building to check the tire pressure. But as I walked around the entire gas station complex, the reality began to sink in. They had left without me. My daughter and grandchildren had driven away in the car I was paying for, abandoning me at a gas station 30 miles from my home. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe they'd thought I was already in the car when they left. Maybe Tyler had been talking and distracting Jessica, causing her to forget that I'd gone inside. Maybe they'd realize their error and come back within a few minutes. I stood near the entrance to the convenience store, watching every Honda Pilot that drove past. waiting for Jessica to return with an apologetic explanation about the misunderstanding. But 15 minutes passed, then 30, then 45. Cars came and went. Travelers filled their tanks and continued their journeys, and I remained stranded in the parking lot of a gas station with no way to get home. That's when I called Jessica's cell phone. "Mom?" She sounded surprised to hear from me, as if she'd genuinely forgotten that I existed. "Jessica, you left me at the gas station." There was a pause that lasted several beats too long. "Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry. We thought you were in the car." Tyler was telling us about his chess tournament, and Madison was picking music, and I guess we just didn't notice. "Jessica, I told you I was going to the restroom. You told me where to find it. I know. We just got distracted and didn't realize you weren't in the car when we pulled away. Where are you now?" "We're almost to Golden, but don't worry, I'll turn around and come get you right now. Just wait there, and I'll be back in about 40 minutes. 40 minutes. She was nearly at our destination, 30 miles from where she'd left me, which meant she'd been driving for at least 30 minutes without noticing that her mother was missing from the car. "Jessica, how do you drive for 30 minutes without noticing that one of your passengers isn't in the car?" "Mom, I'm really sorry. The kids were talking, and I was focused on driving, and I just didn't think to check that everyone was buckled in. I've been standing in this parking lot for almost an hour." "I know, and I feel terrible about it. But I'm turning around right now to come get you." 50 minutes, Jessica. You've been gone for 50 minutes, and it never occurred to you to wonder where I was. "Mom, accidents happen." "I said I was sorry, and I'm coming to get you. There's no need to make this into a bigger deal than it is. No need to make this into a bigger deal than it is." I'd been abandoned at a gas station for nearly an hour by people who were so accustomed to my irrelevance that they could drive halfway to their destination without noticing my absence. And Jessica thought I was overreacting by being upset about it. "Jessica, this wasn't an accident." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you don't accidentally forget a person in a car. You forget a purse or a phone or a jacket. You don't forget a human being who's been part of your group all day." "Mom, it really was an accident. We were distracted, and you were distracted because I don't matter enough to you to keep track of. You left me here because in your mind, I'm not important enough to notice when I'm missing. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Jessica. When? Was the last time Tyler or Madison was left behind somewhere by accident?" She couldn't answer that question because we both knew it had never happened. Parents don't accidentally leave their children behind because children matter to them. Children are important enough to keep track of. But apparently I wasn't. "Mom, I'm on my way to get you. We can talk about this when I pick you up." "No, Jessica." "Don't come back." "What?" I said, "Don't come back for me. I'll find my own way home." "Mom, don't be ridiculous. You're 30 miles from Boulder and you don't have a car. I have a phone. I can call a taxi or a rideshare. That's going to cost a fortune. Less than what I spend on your car payment every month." "Mom, just let me come get you. There's no reason to spend money on a taxi when I can pick you up." "There's every reason, Jessica. Because I'm done accepting rides from people who can't be bothered to remember I exist." "Mom, you're being dramatic." "Am I?" "Jessica, you left your 70-year-old mother at a gas station for almost an hour and drove halfway to your destination without noticing. If that's not dramatic enough to warrant some emotion, I don't know what would be. It was an honest mistake. No, it was the inevitable result of months of treating me like I'm invisible. You've gotten so comfortable with ignoring me that you literally forgot I was there. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. And Jessica, it's exactly what I should have expected. You've been forgetting I exist in every other aspect of your life. Why should today be any different?" I hung up before she could respond, then immediately called for an Uber. The driver, a kind middle-aged man named Carlos, didn't ask why a senior citizen was stranded alone at a gas station on a Saturday afternoon, and I was grateful for his discretion. The ride home cost $52, but it was worth every penny for the clarity it provided. As Carlos drove me through the familiar Colorado landscape toward Boulder, I had 45 minutes to process what had just happened and what it meant for my relationship with Jessica's family. They had left me behind. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, but literally. They had driven away and left me standing in a parking lot like a piece of forgotten luggage. And when Jessica realized what had happened, her first instinct hadn't been horror or genuine remorse. Her first instinct had been to minimize the situation, to frame it as a simple mistake that I was overreacting to. But leaving someone at a gas station isn't a simple mistake. It's a sign that the person being left behind doesn't matter enough to be kept track of. It's evidence that their presence or absence doesn't register as significant, and that's exactly how Jessica had been treating me for months. Like someone whose presence was so unimportant that it could be easily overlooked. As Carlos pulled into my driveway and I handed him a cash tip, I realized that this incident had clarified something I'd been reluctant to acknowledge. My relationship with Jessica's family had become toxic and unsustainable. I was funding their lifestyle while being treated as an inconvenience. I was making their activities possible while being excluded from participating in them. I was giving them the gift of financial security while receiving the message that I was a burden they had to occasionally tolerate. And now they'd literally left me behind. That evening, as I sat in my living room thinking about everything that had led to this moment, I made a decision that Jessica would never see coming. I was done being taken for granted. I was done accepting crumbs of attention while providing substantial financial support. I was done enabling Jessica's entitled attitude by continuing to fund a lifestyle that didn't include me. Most importantly, I was done teaching my grandchildren that this was how family members treated each other. It was time for Jessica to learn what it felt like to need something from someone who didn't need anything from her. The next morning, I called Richard Walsh, my attorney, and made an appointment to see him first thing Monday morning. "Richard, I need to sell a car," I said when he answered the phone. "The Honda Pilot we discussed a few weeks ago?" "Yes, I want it sold as quickly as possible, and I want the transaction to be completely legal and documented. Dorothy, have you discussed this with your daughter? Selling a vehicle that someone else has been relying on for transportation is a significant step." "Richard, they left me at a gas station yesterday and drove 30 miles without noticing I was missing. I think they've made their position on family consideration quite clear." There was a pause while Richard processed what I'd told him. "I see. Well, as we discussed before, you have every legal right to sell a vehicle that you own. But I want to make sure you've thought through all the implications of this action. I've been thinking about it for months. Yesterday just confirmed what I already knew. This relationship is one-sided and unsustainable. All right, let me make some calls and find out what the current market value is for your vehicle. I can also recommend some dealerships that specialize in quick sales if you want to move forward rapidly. I want to move forward immediately. How quickly can this be done? If you're willing to accept a fair market price rather than trying to maximize the sale value, probably within 48 hours. Maybe sooner if the dealership has interested buyers. Do it. Dorothy, once this car is sold, your daughter's family is going to be in a very difficult position. Are you prepared for the consequences of that? I thought about Madison missing soccer practices, Tyler unable to get to chess tournaments, Jessica struggling to get to work at the hospital. I thought about them having to take public transportation or expensive ride shares to get around Denver. I thought about the stress and inconvenience that losing their primary vehicle would create. Then I thought about being excluded from Christmas dinner, being uninvited to family outings, being lied to about hiking trips, being deemed too distracting, for soccer tournaments, and being literally forgotten at a gas station. Richard, I'm prepared for them to experience some of the consequences of their choices. Fair enough. I'll get started on this right away. Monday morning, I met Richard at the car dealership he'd recommended. a reputable used car lot that specialized in quick sales for customers who needed to liquidate vehicles rapidly. The sales manager, a professional woman named Karen, had already appraised the Honda Pilot based on Richard's description and was prepared to make an immediate offer. Mrs. Sullivan, based on the vehicle's age, mileage, and condition, we can offer you $2,4,500 for immediate purchase. The car will be off your hands and out of your name by this afternoon. It was less than I'd paid for the car 14 months earlier, but it was fair market value, and more importantly, it was final. No more monthly payments, no more insurance, costs, no more being taken for granted by people who used my generosity to fund their social activities while excluding me from those activities. I'll take it, I said. Richard handled all the paperwork while I turned over the keys, the title, and the spare remote that I'd kept in my house for emergencies. By 2 p.m. Monday afternoon, the Honda Pilot was no longer my responsibility. But Jessica didn't know that yet. I drove home in the rental car that Richard had arranged for me, a temporary solution while I decided whether to buy another vehicle, or simply use ride-sharing services for my transportation needs, and spent the afternoon preparing for the conversation I knew was coming. Jessica had called twice Sunday evening, both times going to voicemail because I hadn't been ready to speak with her yet. She'd left apologetic messages about the gas station incident, promising it would never happen again and asking me to call her back. But I hadn't called her back because I wasn't interested in more empty apologies or meaningless promises. I was interested in consequences. At 4:30 Monday afternoon, my phone rang with Jessica's number. "Mom, thank God you're answering. I've been so worried about you. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Jessica. I feel so terrible about what happened Saturday. I've been beating myself up all weekend about leaving you at that gas station. I can't believe we were so careless." "It's fine, Jessica. Really." "No, it's not fine. It was inexcusable, and I want to make it up to you. What if we planned a nice family dinner this weekend? Somewhere special, just the four of us, to show you how much we appreciate everything you do for us." The irony was breathtaking. Now that Jessica was feeling guilty, she was suddenly ready to include me in family activities and express appreciation for my contributions. It was exactly the pattern I'd come to expect. Jessica would treat me poorly until she needed something from me, at which point she'd become temporarily attentive and grateful. "That's not necessary, Jessica." "Yes, it is." "Mom, I know things have been tense between us lately, but I want you to know that you're important to us. You're family, and family doesn't leave family behind." "Jessica, where's the car right now?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, where is the Honda Pilot right now?" "It's in our driveway." "Why?" "You might want to go check on that." There was a pause. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Jessica, go outside and look in your driveway, then call me back." "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Just go look, Jessica." I hung up and waited. It took 12 minutes for her to call back, and when she did, her voice was shaking. "Mom, the car is gone. The Honda Pilot is gone. Did you have it repossessed?" "I sold it." "You what?" "I sold it. This afternoon. To a dealership in Boulder." "You can't do that. That's our car." "No, Jessica. It was my car. My name on the title, my name on the loan, my monthly payments. And I sold it." "But we need that car. I have to get to work. The kids have school. Madison has soccer practice. Tomorrow." "Jessica, you left me at a gas station and forgot I existed for an hour. Clearly, you don't need me in your lives. So I decided you don't need my car either. Mom, this is insane. You can't just sell our car because you're mad about Saturday." "I'm not mad about Saturday, Jessica. I'm done with the entire relationship dynamic that made Saturday possible." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done funding a lifestyle that doesn't include me. I'm done being taken for granted by people who treat me like an inconvenience. I'm done accepting scraps of attention while providing substantial financial support." "Mom, we can work this out. If you're upset about being excluded from some activities, we can change that. We can include you more. Like you included me in Madison's state tournament. We can discuss Madison's future games. Like you included me in Tyler's chess nationals. If Tyler qualifies for nationals again next year. Like you included me in your family Christmas celebration. Jessica was quiet. Jessica, you've had 14 months to include me in your family life. 14 months during which I've paid over $8,000 in car payments and insurance to support activities I wasn't welcome to participate in. You've made your priorities clear. We'll pay you back for the car. Every penny. With what money? You couldn't afford a $420 car payment, which is why I bought the car in the first place. We'll figure it out. We'll get a loan or… Jessica, you couldn't qualify for a car loan 14 months ago. Your credit was too poor and your debt load too high. What's changed since then? She couldn't answer because nothing had changed. If anything, their financial situation was worse now after months of relying on my subsidies rather than improving their own circumstances. Mom, please, the kids need transportation. Madison has soccer, Tyler has chess, I have to get to work. We can't function without a car. Then you should have thought about that before you forgot I existed. It was an accident. No, Jessica, it was a symptom. For months, you've been treating me like I'm invisible. You exclude me from family activities, ignore my feelings, dismiss my concerns, and take my financial support for granted. Saturday, you just made it literal. We don't treat you like you're invisible. Don't you? When was the last time you called to invite me to something instead of waiting for me to invite myself? When was the last time you considered my feelings before making family plans? When was the last time you treated me like someone whose presence added value to your lives rather than someone whose absence made things easier? Jessica couldn't answer any of those questions because we both knew the truth. Mom, I know we haven't been perfect, but selling our car is a huge overreaction. This is going to create massive problems for our family. And treating me like an unwelcome burden for over a year didn't create problems for our family? That's different. How is it different? Because you could afford to help us. Losing the car is going to hurt the kids. And being excluded from the kids' lives hurt me. But that didn't stop you from doing it. Mom, we never meant to hurt you. Intent doesn't matter, Jessica. Impact matters. And the impact of your choices has been to make me feel unwanted and unvalued in my own family. So you're punishing us? I'm setting boundaries. I'm refusing to continue funding my own mistreatment. What if we promise to include you more? What if we commit to treating you better? Jessica, this isn't about promises anymore. This is about patterns. And the pattern has been very clear. You treat me poorly until you need something from me, then you promise to do better. Then you go back to treating me poorly. I'm not interested in continuing that cycle. What can we do to prove we've changed? Nothing. Because anything you do now will be motivated by wanting access to my money, rather than by genuine care for me as a person. That's not true. Prove it. Show me that you value me without asking for anything financial in return. How? Figure it out, Jessica, but don't expect me to fund the process. So what happens now? Do we just not have a relationship anymore? We have whatever relationship you've chosen to create. You've shown me clearly and repeatedly that you don't value my presence, my feelings, or my contributions to this family. I'm simply accepting that reality and adjusting my behavior accordingly. But, Mom, we love you. No, Jessica, you love my money. There's a difference. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Jessica alternating between anger, desperation, and bargaining. She threatened to cut off all contact if I didn't help them get another car. She promised to include me in every family activity, going forward if I would just loan them money for a down payment. She accused me of being vindictive and manipulative, but I remained calm and clear about my boundaries. The car was sold, the financial support was over, and our relationship would be whatever she chose to make it without the leverage of my money. Over the next 2 weeks, Jessica called me repeatedly, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. I answered some of the calls and listened to her various attempts to negotiate a solution that would restore her access to my financial support. She offered to pay me back for the car over time, despite having no means to do so. She suggested I co-sign for a new loan, which would have put me right back in the same financial position without addressing any of the underlying relationship issues. She even proposed that I buy them a cheaper car, as if the problem was the expense rather than the lack of respect, but I held firm to my boundaries. No more financial support, no more enabling their entitled behavior, no more funding activities I wasn't welcome to participate in. The consequences for Jessica's family were significant and immediate. Madison had to miss several soccer practices and games because they couldn't afford the ride-sharing costs for regular transportation. Tyler's chess performance suffered when he couldn't attend his usual coaching sessions. Jessica had to take public transportation to work, adding 3 hours to her daily commute and creating significant stress in her already demanding schedule. But I felt no guilt about these consequences because they were the natural result of Jessica's choices. She'd decided to treat me poorly while relying on my financial support. She'd chosen to exclude me from family life while expecting me to fund that family life. She'd literally left me at a gas station while driving around in the car I was paying. For these weren't my consequences to manage, they were hers. 3 weeks after I sold the car, Jessica made one final attempt to repair our relationship. She appeared at my door on a Sunday afternoon, looking exhausted and defeated. "Mom, can we talk?" I invited her in, made tea, and listened as she offered what sounded like a genuine apology for how she'd treated me over the past year. "I've had a lot of time to think about our relationship while I've been riding the bus to work," she said with a rueful smile. "And I realized that I took you for granted in ways that must have been really hurtful. Go on. I excluded you from family activities because it was easier for me, not because it was better for the kids. I made excuses for not including you because I was selfish, not because I was protecting anyone. And I left you at that gas station because I'd gotten so used to not thinking about your needs that I literally forgot you existed." It was the most honest acknowledgement of her behavior that I'd heard from Jessica in over a year. I also realized that selling the car was the logical response to how I was treating you. You were paying for our transportation and getting nothing but disrespect in return. I would have done the same thing. Would you? I hope I would have had the self-respect to stop enabling someone who was treating me that poorly. We talked for 2 hours that afternoon, and for the first time in months, it felt like a real conversation between mother and daughter, rather than a negotiation between a creditor and a debtor. Jessica didn't ask me for money. She didn't suggest that I help them buy another car. She didn't make any demands or try to manipulate me into resuming financial support. Instead, she told me about the steps they were taking to solve their transportation problems themselves. She'd found a carpool arrangement with a coworker that would get her to work more efficiently. Madison had joined a soccer carpool with other families. Tyler was taking the bus to his chess club and walking home. "It's not ideal," Jessica admitted, "but we're figuring it out. And honestly, the kids are learning some valuable lessons about not taking things for granted." "What kind of lessons?" Madison told me last week that she never realized how much work it was to coordinate transportation until she had to think about it herself. And Tyler said he understands now why you were upset about being excluded from family activities, because being left out makes you feel unimportant. It was encouraging to hear that my grandchildren were beginning to understand the impact of their behavior, but I wasn't ready to resume my previous role in their lives. "Jessica, I appreciate your apology, and I can see that you've learned from this experience. But I need you to understand that selling the car wasn't punishment. It was self-preservation. I can't go back to being treated like an ATM with visiting privileges." "I understand that, and I'm not asking you to. What are you asking for?" I'm asking for the chance to rebuild our relationship on better terms. No financial obligations, no strings attached. Just the opportunity to show you that I can value you for who you are, rather than what you can provide. What would that look like? I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out, if you're willing. 6 months later, Jessica and I have developed a new relationship that's healthier and more honest than what we had before. She still struggles with transportation logistics, but she's managing them without my financial support. The kids have learned to appreciate the help they receive rather than taking it for granted. And I've learned to value my own time and resources rather than giving them away to people who don't reciprocate my consideration. Jessica includes me in family activities now, not because she feels obligated to, but because she genuinely wants my company. Madison asks my advice about college applications and future plans. Tyler shows me his chess games and explains the strategies he's learning. Our relationship isn't perfect, but it's built on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. And that makes all the difference. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their worst behavior. Sometimes the best gift you can give your family is the lesson that love isn't about what you can get from people. It's about how you treat them when you don't need anything from them. Jessica learned that lesson the hard way, but she learned it well. And I learned that I'm worth more than my bank account, my car payments, and my willingness to accept poor treatment in exchange for minimal inclusion. At 70 years old, I finally learned to put myself first, and it felt amazing. The end. Sometimes the people who need you most are the ones who treat you worst, until you show them what life looks like without you. Epilogue. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my garden. This morning, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper, when my phone buzzes with a text from Madison. She's now 18 and a freshman at Colorado State University, where she earned a partial soccer scholarship. Grandma Dorothy, my roommate, can't believe I take the bus everywhere instead of having a car. I told her it's because my family learned the hard way that transportation is a privilege, not a right. She thinks I'm wise beyond my years. Can't wait to see you at Parents' Weekend. I smile as I type back. I'm proud of the young woman you've become. See you next week. 2 years ago, if someone had told me that selling Jessica's car would ultimately strengthen our family relationships, I would have thought they were crazy. But sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most important growth. Jessica did eventually save up enough money to buy a reliable used car, a 2015 Honda Civic that she purchased with her own money after 8 months of public transportation, carpooling, and careful budgeting. The day she brought it home, she called me with genuine excitement. Mom, I bought a car. My own car. With my own money. I never realized how good it would feel to own something I actually earned. She was right to be proud. For the first time. In her adult life, Jessica had solved a major problem through her own effort and determination, rather than relying on someone else to fix things for her. Tyler, now 17, recently qualified for state chess championships again. This time, when Jessica called to tell me about it, the conversation was completely different. Mom, Tyler made it to state. The tournament is next month in Colorado Springs. We're all so excited, and we'd love for you to come watch if you're available. I'd be honored to be there. Great, I'll send you all the details. And Mom? Tyler specifically asked me to make sure you knew you were invited. He said his teammates have been asking about his grandma who taught him to think strategically. I've attended every one of Tyler's chess tournaments since then, not because I'm paying for his transportation, but because I'm a valued member of his support system. The transformation in Madison and Tyler's attitudes toward me has been remarkable. They no longer see me as the grandma who used to buy us stuff, but as someone who has interesting stories, valuable advice, and unconditional love. Our relationships are built on genuine affection rather than financial obligation. Madison calls me regularly from college, not to ask for money, but to tell me about her classes, her friends, and her plans for the future. Tyler stops by my house after school sometimes, just to chat about his day or show me something he's learned. These conversations are precious to me because they're voluntary. My grandchildren choose to spend time with me because they enjoy my company, not because their mother is obligating them to maintain a relationship with their benefactor. As for Jessica, she's become a different person, stronger, more confident, and infinitely more appreciative of the help she receives. She's also become a better parent, teaching Madison and Tyler lessons about gratitude, hard work, and treating family members with respect. Last Christmas, Jessica hosted a beautiful family dinner at her house. She cooked Frank's favorite ham recipe, set the table with care, and made sure I felt honored and included throughout the celebration. At one point during the evening, she raised her glass in a toast. "To Mom," she said, looking directly at me. "Thank you for loving us enough to teach us hard lessons. Thank you for showing us that family relationships should be based on respect, not just need. And thank you for giving us the chance to earn back your trust." It was the most meaningful Christmas I'd had since Frank died. I never did buy another car. I discovered that ride-sharing services and public transportation meet my needs perfectly well, and I enjoy not having the financial responsibility of vehicle ownership. The money I save on car payments, insurance, and maintenance has allowed me to travel more, pursue new hobbies, and contribute to causes I care about. But most importantly, I learned to value my own worth independently of what I could provide for others. At 72 years old, I'm more confident and self-assured than I've ever been. I have wonderful friendships, fulfilling volunteer work, and a family that finally treats me with the love and respect I deserve. Sometimes people ask me if I regret selling the car, if I think I overreacted to that day at the gas station. My answer is always the same. I regret that it took me so long to stand up for myself. Being left at that gas station was the best thing that ever happened to our family. It forced us all to confront the truth about our relationships and make the choice to build something better. Jessica learned that love isn't about what you can get from people, but about how you treat them when you don't need anything from them. Madison and Tyler learned that family members deserve respect and consideration, regardless of their age or circumstances. And I learned that the most loving thing you can sometimes do is stop enabling people's worst behavior and start requiring their best. Our family is smaller now. I no longer have relationships with relatives who proved they were only interested in what I could provide, rather than who I am as a person. But our family is also stronger, more honest, and built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than financial dependence. If you're reading this story and recognizing yourself in my situation, if you're giving more than you're receiving, funding, more than you're valued, or accepting poor treatment because you're afraid of losing people you love, I want you to know something. You deserve better. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you provide. You deserve relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection. You deserve family members who include you because they want you there, not because they feel obligated to tolerate your presence. And if the people in your life can't offer you those things, then maybe it's time to stop offering them the privilege of your generosity. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from people who don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to miss you. And sometimes the best way to save a relationship is to be willing to lose it. Take it from a 72-year-old grandmother who finally learned to put herself first. It's never too late to start requiring the respect you deserve. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and setting boundaries with difficult family members. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.